Thank you very much, Acting Speaker. I rise to address the Short Stay Levy Bill 2024. On commencing my contribution, Acting Speaker, by leave, I seek the opportunity to speak on this bill for an hour.
Is leave granted? No, leave is not granted.
It's a real shame, actually, Acting Speaker, because I have so much material before me that I could quite easily fill an hour, perhaps more than that, because of the circumstance in which not only the government has brought the bill to the House, but the lack of consultation with industry. This bill is a real shame, Acting Speaker. It is a real shame because it introduces into this House, into the Victorian statute books, potentially, Labor's 55th new or increased tax since coming to government. That's right, Acting Speaker. In the last 10 years, after 10 years of the Andrews, now Allan Labor government, there have been 55 new or increased taxes introduced or increased, and this is number 55. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, Victorians don't need to be taxed more than they already are. They need a government that understands the circumstance, and they need a government that will tax them less. You don't tax people more and expect things to be cheaper. You don't tax things more and expect them to be more affordable. In fact, if you tax things more, things get more expensive. And that's the case with this new tax. The government refers to this new tax as their short stay levy. I refer to it as Labor's 55th new or increased tax, their holiday and tourism tax, because that will be the impact of this bill. It is a tax on holidays. It is a tax on tourism. And frankly, Acting Speaker, what sort of mug taxes a holiday? What sort of mug taxes tourism? Well, this Labor government does both, and Victorians are paying the price because of it. Acting Speaker, I am grateful, sincerely grateful for the engagement that I've had with a number of stakeholders in relation to preparing this bill report and the opposition ahead of this bill being considered today. I'm grateful for the input of organisations such as the Expedia Group, the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Victorian Tourism Industry Council, the Property Council of Victoria, Airbnb, the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, the Urban Development Institute of Australia, the Short-Term Accommodation Association Australia, Accessible Accommodation, and I'll come back to Ashley Morton a little bit later, the Master Builders Victoria, Great Ocean Road Regional Tourism Group, Allogio, Quickstay, Manny Welfare Housing Corporation, Transport and Tourism Forum, the Australian-New Zealand Short-Term Rental Association. And I can say, Acting Speaker, with absolute clarity and absolute certainty, that this bill is friendless. Amongst the stakeholders that I've engaged with, this bill is friendless. There is not one person or organisation that I've engaged with on this bill that thinks that this is a good idea or will have the impact that the government states it will. Airbnb has said, quote, "The proposed levy will apply only to short-term rental accommodation, creating an uneven playing field that puts everyday Victorians who share their homes behind large corporate hotel chains." Expedia Group says, quote, "We believe the short-term rental sector is not the cause or solution to housing pressure. Any levy should be fair and apply to all accommodation types." The Victorian Tourism Industry Council has said, quote, "From our initial conversations with Treasury, we're deeply concerned that the Victorian Government does not fully understand the landscape of the short stay market and the unintended consequence of this levy." The Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry has said, and I quote, "There is undeniably a need for more social and affordable housing, but the short stay levy is another tax on Victorians that doesn't exist in other states and territories. It makes our state less attractive to visitors and puts businesses who rely upon tourism at a distinct disadvantage." The Great Ocean Road Regional Tourism Group has said, and I quote, "This is a tax on the visitor economy, which takes money out of the industry. It's another hit to our sector after we already experienced severe funding cuts to tourism in the 2024-25 state budget." The Short-Term Accommodation Association Australia has said, and I quote, "Singling out short-stay accommodations while commercial short stays are exempt disproportionately targets small businesses and mum and dad investors in regional Victoria." These are just some of the responses that I've received from stakeholders that the government has said that it has consulted with, but if they had actually consulted, they would have listened, Acting Speaker. And on this occasion, as with other occasions, the government has not listened. The government has said that this is about more housing, but the government has failed to demonstrate, and I'd be very keen, Acting Speaker, to hear from government members who contribute to this debate today. Very keen, very keen to hear from government members about the exact number of houses that they expect to come onto become available onto the short-term, the long-term rental market, or in the housing, or in the affordable housing space. Because to this date, the government has not been able to demonstrate that. They say that that is their policy intent, and Acting Speaker, I respect their policy intent. We do need more housing in Victoria, but taxing short stays will not achieve that outcome, which says to me that this is nothing more than a tax grab from a government who has the highest debt in the nation. This tax will not solve the housing crisis in Victoria. Victoria's rental vacancy rate is currently at a historic low, estimated to be between 1% and 2%. There is no evidence, Acting Speaker, to support a tax on short stays that will actually boost the supply of long-term rentals, and the government has failed to provide that evidence as well. Victoria's housing crisis is felt right across Victoria, in regional Victoria and in metropolitan Melbourne. According to Airbnb, 50% of short-stay rentals are positioned in regional Victoria. Pressuring regional investors to sell or put their homes on the long-term market won't solve the rental crisis felt right across the state. For example, if you owned a sizable property on the Mornington Peninsula, for argument's sake, that won't provide, if that property was then shifted to potentially be on the long-term rental market or put up for sale into the sale market. Frankly, there are first-home buyers around Victoria that wouldn't be able to afford that particular home. So it is a false argument from the government to say that forcing sizable homes in places like the Mornington Peninsula onto the long-term rental market or onto the sale market will actually improve housing in this state. That is simply wrong. It is another hit. This tax is another hit to Victoria's tourism industry. It will do more harm than good, dissuading tourists from visiting Victorian regions. The Shadow Minister for Tourism and Major Events is at the table with me today, and I'm sure that he will go into greater detail on this. But as has been shared with us by the Victorian Tourism Industry Council, during COVID, Victoria relinquished its number 2 spot on the ladder behind New South Wales to Queensland on the metric for total overall tourism spend by visitors. Over time, so says VTIC, we have failed to narrow the gap quarter on quarter since 2021. They go on to say, when we consider our position on the national scale, Victoria significantly lags behind New South Wales, who has hit a staggering $53 billion in total spend by visitors to the state, with Queensland firmly in the number 2 spot, achieving $41 billion in total spend. While Victoria is growing quarter on quarter in performance, the growth of our major competitors in Australia is outpacing our success. So again, taxing something is not going to incentivise getting more tourists to Victoria. In fact, it will push them further and further away. Acting Speaker, there is also an impact on the visitor economy in tourist regions within this state, communities which rely upon tourism dollars to survive. There are many of those communities around this state, and frankly, if visitors to those regional communities in particular are hit with a greater tax and are spending more because of Labor's 55th new or increased tax, they will spend less in those communities. And over a period of time, Labor's tax adds up. This isn't just a tax on the accommodation element. This is a tax on accommodation, plus all the service charges that come with staying in a short-term rental. It is a tax on all of those things, and it will cost Victorians at a time when they can least afford it. It will have an unfair impact on Victorian small businesses, specifically in regional Victoria. But truthfully, all Victorians will be punished by this tax. Around 40% of those who stay in short-term rentals aren't in fact tourists. They are FIFO workers, they are frontline workers, they are people who are fleeing domestic violence, they are vulnerable Victorians who, for whatever reason or circumstance, aren't able to stay in their own long-term rental accommodation or in their own home and need emergency housing. So around 40% of people who stay in short-term rentals aren't in fact tourists. So all of those Victorians will also be subjected to this new Labor tax. This tax disproportionately impacts women, Acting Speaker. According to Airbnb, 65% of their hosts are female. And in many communities, short-stay accommodation provides a revenue source and flexible work from home. Women dominate the short-stay sector, with the majority of hosts over the age of 50. It's also important to note that women over 50 are the demographic most at risk of becoming homeless, so short-stay platforms can serve as a form of economic empowerment. Labor's tax will hurt all Victorians and will place women at a competitive disadvantage in the marketplace. And I just wonder, Acting Speaker, if the Labor government considered that fact when they were bringing this tax to the Parliament today, and I dare say they have not. This tax is in fact the largest, the highest short-stay levy of any such levy in the entire world. At a proposed rate of 7.5%, it will be the highest in the world. Councils also have the power. In fact, this bill more or less green lights councils to slap additional taxes on short-term stays, meaning there will be different rules across the 79 local government areas. So there's no consistency across the state in terms of the regulations and the taxes that local governments can place on short stays. It's going to be an absolute and utter mess. It is terrible for that reason, and 100% of the tax will in fact go to pay off Labor's debt. It won't actually go back into the regions from which it is collected. Let's have a frank conversation, Acting Speaker. Homes Victoria, the state government body charged with producing affordable housing and social housing in this state, is currently about $180 million in the red. The Labor government the Treasurer, when this bill was first spoken of last year, in fact, the suggestion was that this tax would raise about $75 million in revenue. That has been significantly revised down to $60 million. There are people that I've spoken to who question whether the revenue stream of $60 million is actually appropriate or otherwise, because they think that, especially with council elections coming up in October this year, there will be some councils that use this opportunity that this government has given them to effectively ban short stays in their own municipalities, the opportunity to in fact do that, which would significantly, which would further reduce the potential or the anticipated revenue as well. But this tax, this revenue coming from this new tax, it won't be put into new homes. The government says it'll be put into new homes. It won't be put into new homes. It'll be put into paying off the highest debt in the nation. It'll be put into paying the debt of Homes Victoria, which currently sits at about $180 million. It'll go into paying Labor's interest bill on their debt, which is climbing to $26 million a day, each and every day in just a few short years' time. This government has not considered a number of circumstances when bringing this bill to the Parliament. Yesterday, I met with Ashley Morton. In fact, I welcomed Ashley Morton together with the Shadow Minister for Tourism to the Parliament. Ashley is from Accessible Accommodation. On first meeting Ashley, Acting Speaker, I found her to be unassuming, but forthright and driven. Ashley's wheelchair bound. She's a single mum. She has two teenage children. She is a powerful advocate. She is a powerful advocate. Yeah. There are Victorians around the state, disabled Victorians, who choose to stay in short-term rental accommodation, such as Airbnb and through other platforms, because it enables them and their families to have the greatest support and flexibility that they need when they're going on holidays. They choose short stays over hotel accommodation because hotel accommodation doesn't allow them or doesn't fit the needs that they have when they're travelling either by themselves or with their families, as Ashley explained yesterday. If equipment is required to support a disabled Victorian that isn't in a hotel setting, sure, it can be hired, but it can be hired for a minimum period of time. So if Ashley, for example, was travelling for work reasons for 1 or 2 nights and required additional equipment to support her with her needs, yes, she could hire it, but that's frankly a pain in the backside because often the people who who rent out this type of equipment have a minimum time for which it can be rented. It could be 1 week, it could be up to 4 weeks, which means additional costs for Ashley, unnecessary costs for Ashley, whereas there are short stay accommodation places in Victoria at the moment who have inbuilt within their property offering the supports that some disabled Victorians need. In fact, Ashley was telling us only yesterday that if you have a severe disability and wish to travel in this state and you are requiring things like lifters and high-low beds and other equipment that disabled Victorians rely upon, in terms of hotels in Victoria, there's an option for you. There's an option for you, but there's only one. And it's a hotel in Burwood East. Now, you know, nothing against Burwood East, Acting Speaker, but it certainly wouldn't be my first destination to go on holiday, either by myself or with my family. And
where do you go? Where do you go for your holiday?
And
you go to the Grampians in Mile.
Yeah, there are many other places that you go to over Burwood East, and I look, I've had some decent dumplings in Burwood East, but beyond that, the member's interjecting, and that's disorderly, Acting Speaker, but I'm sure. Look, I'm pleased government members are listening because there is an opportunity to change this bill. I suggest that it won't take place in the Assembly. I implore government members to change this bill when it reaches the Council. Please, please carve out a portion of this bill that means disabled Victorians aren't taxed more to go on holiday, either by themselves or with their families. Please do the right thing by disabled Victorians and their families. Don't disproportionately impact them or their families simply in the name of a tax grab. Please, please, please. And the same, Acting Speaker, should be said for victims of domestic violence. Now, Ashley, who again visited Parliament yesterday, said in a note to me, quote, "Accessible short-term rental properties are essential for ensuring that people with disabilities can travel comfortably and enjoy the same opportunities as others. Many of us rely on these specially adapted accommodations to ensure a safe and enjoyable stay when away from home, and short-term rentals are much more suited to this type of traveller rather than hotels and motels. Few hotels cater to higher physical needs, and a short-stay property gives us the flexibility to save money with self-contained cooking facilities. The new tax poses a serious threat to the availability and affordability of accessible accommodation. Well, to Ashley's comments, I say, hear, hear. This side of the chamber says, hear, hear. Yeah. We are on your side, Ashley. We are on the side of disabled Victorians, and we encourage, we implore, we plead with the government to move amendments in the council so that disabled Victorians are not disproportionately impacted by their latest tax grab. We think that's a fair and eminently sensible request of the government. Acting Speaker, we now come to the question of constitutionality of this bill. This is something that has been raised publicly. It's been raised by me publicly for many, many months now, in fact, and more recently in the media as well. I hope, Acting Speaker, that the government hasn't received advice on whether this bill is constitutional or otherwise from the same people, group, mob outfit that they received advice that their electric vehicle tax was also constitutionally sound. I'd like to think that the government sourced separate legal advice, given the disaster that was in the High Court for the government. Acting Speaker, in fact, I raised this matter with the Federal Treasurer, the Honourable Dr Jim Chalmers, on the 11th of August last year, so more than 12 months ago, in fact 13 months ago. I wrote to the Treasurer then to raise with him a series of questions about whether the imposition of this new tax actually contravened the Intergovernmental Agreement on Federal Financial Relations that was introduced following the introduction of the GST in the year 2000. Because this Airbnb tax, this short stay levy, this holiday and tourism tax, well, you know, it looks like a bed tax, it sounds like a bed tax, it smells like a bed tax, and that bed tax was scrapped in the year 2000 as part of the Intergovernmental Agreement on Federal Financial Relations, and replaced by GST revenue, which the states have been benefiting from ever since. So I raised these matters with the Federal Treasurer in August of last year. I said, I write to express my concern at the Andrews government's proposal to break the Intergovernmental Agreement on Federal Financial Relations with the introduction of the holiday and tourism tax. Recent reports reveal that your state Labor counterpart, Tim Pallas, is examining options to introduce a holiday and tourism tax. As you would be aware, when the Goods and Services Tax was introduced in 2000, all states and territories agreed to abolish a number of economically damaging taxes in exchange for the revenue that would flow from the GST. One of those taxes were accommodation taxes levied on the cost of temporary residential accommodation, otherwise known as bed taxes. I go on to ask the Treasurer a series of questions. Now, frankly, I didn't expect a response. I thought, no, the Treasurer, the Federal Treasurer, would just file that and I wouldn't get a response. But, to my surprise, Acting Speaker, I got a response. I got a response many months later, in fact, 5 months later, in January 2024, from the Office of the Treasurer. Dear Mr Rosewell, thank you for your correspondence concerning the Victorian Government's proposed introduction of a holiday and tourism tax. Pleased to see that the Federal Treasurer is even adopting my language.
He knows what it is.
The Treasurer has asked me to respond on their behalf. The Intergovernmental Agreement on Federal Financial Relations does not constrain the states and territories from exercising their constitutional powers to impose taxes. I would encourage you to engage with the Victorian Government to raise your concerns related to this proposed tax, of course, which I have done. But what the Federal Treasurer actually did, Acting Speaker, was greenlight the Victorian Government, independent of the intergovernmental agreement that I referred to do whatever they like and tax whatever they like. This is a Labor state and Labor federal cabal working together against Victorians. They are ignoring that intergovernmental agreement that was agreed to some 24 years ago. They don't give us stuff about it. What they do give us stuff about is raising more revenue to pay off their record debt, and Victorians are paying the price because of it. Of course, I'm happy to make all of this correspondence available to the House and to Hansard. Further, on the matter of constitutionality, this matter has been raised in a series of news articles recently, and that legal advice has also been made available to me as well. And I quote from a recent Herald Sun article in relation to it. A legal challenge to Victoria's controversial new Airbnb tax could blow a $60 million hole in the state budget and hamper the Allen government's efforts to address the state's housing crisis. High-level legal advice circulating amongst tourism operators has flagged the new tax, which is due to be debated in Parliament next week, could be unconstitutional. Senior tax lawyers have been reviewing the short-stay levy bill 2024 in recent days, with the potential High Court challenge understood to be in consideration. Lawyers say the Airbnb tax could be unconstitutional. Quote, by imposing a levy on the accommodation bookings as opposed, this is the legal advice itself, quote, by imposing a levy on the accommodation bookings as opposed to the stay, the bill may give rise to constitutional issues, as it is not taxing property but the service of booking the property, legal advice has warned. Quote, whilst there is no issue with the state government imposing tax on property in Victoria, there may be issues with imposing tax on bookings. There is an argument that the Victorian government is introducing a state services tax applied to accommodation bookings, which is essentially doubling up the existing goods and services tax. So here we are, Acting Speaker, here we are. This, indeed, this tax is friendless, completely and utterly friendless. It is not supported by industry, it is not supported by communities, it is not supported by the disability sector, it is not supported by domestic violence survivors, it is not supported by legal experts who warned that this tax could be subjected to High Court challenge, and for that reason I move the following reasoned amendment: that all words after that be omitted and replaced with the words, "This House refuses to read this bill a second time until the government commits to A, consulting with the property sector, tourism industry, disability advocates and survivors of family violence about the proposed levy and its impact across Victoria, especially regional Victoria. B, making public modelling showing projected long-term rentals, the impact of Victoria's tourism industry and legal advice about the bill's constitutionality. C, working with the short-stay operators to agree to a regulatory framework for the sector. And D, making public a whole-of-government forward plan for sustainable growth of Victoria's long-term rental stock. We believe, Acting Speaker, that this is an eminently sensible reasoned amendment. We are introducing it to give the government an opportunity. Thank you, Mark, very kind. I have one in my hand. We are introducing this bill to give the government an opportunity to do the right thing by Victorians who are adversely impacted by the state Labor government's 55th new or increased tax. This is simply a tax grab. The economic circumstance in this state is not pretty. This bill will not improve housing affordability or availability. In fact, it will make things more expensive. We've got the highest debt in the nation, the highest taxes in the nation, the highest property taxes in the nation, the highest business taxes in the nation, the lowest wage growth in the nation, and that is the economic circumstance that is on the head of the Allen Labor government and its members, Acting Speaker. And for the government to come into this place today and to introduce their 55th new or increased tax, a tax on holidays and a tax on tourism, is the wrong thing to do. Again, in closing, Acting Speaker, I implore the government, I encourage them with every fibre of my being, please, at the very least, in the council, make this bad bill a less bad bill by carving out exemptions for disabled Victorians and domestic violence survivors. At the very least, if you're going to use your numbers to crash through with this bill, crash through by making this bad bill a less bad bill, by considering the needs of those Victorians who are vulnerable. Acting Speaker, I put on record for this House, in this House, that on the basis that this reasoned amendment won't be agreed to, that this side of the House opposes wholeheartedly Labor's 55th new or increased tax.